Has there been in all of history a nation that has struggled so painfully to birth as we in Wales? Just after Rome, spawning legends such as King Arthur, and who was he, or dare I say, who were he? Plural. Who were these King Arthurs? Usurpers, slavers, barbarian invasions, anarchy, plague, economic ruin, all the while harking back for the peace and glory and stability of Rome, knowing that it was now gone, trying to get them to come back, give us troops, please, to fight these barbarian hordes, and they say no. And so we stand our back to the Atlantic Ocean, pressed, these hordes coming towards us, and we must stand and claim our land somehow, without even fully understanding what our nation now is. This is the birth of Wales in this overly romanticized Dark Age era. But the truth is, it was brutal and sorrowful and woeful, these times of the British Wars of Independence. This is ben.llywelyn, and that is what this video is about today. "25 years after Wales had left the Roman Empire, in 409, the rest of Britain left the Roman Empire. And for 400 years, it fought for its life. And we, the Welsh, come into history during and after this as its survivors, as the inheritors of the Roman Empire in Britain. It's crucial to understand that by the end of the 5th century, Britain was a split, anarchic, civil war-strewn, plague-ridden mess. But we have to go back to when Rome was just about to leave. In the year 402, a general named Stilicho withdrew troops from Britain. He was a Vandal, and military commanders, being of Germanic tribes, was becoming increasingly commonplace at that time within the Roman Empire, the western half. Different generals and different factions used German tribes as auxiliary troops against one another. Now, Stilicho had reorganized British defences, but the Emperor Honorius withdrew him to the continent to deal with issues there, and he took a lot of troops with him. They had to fight Visigoths. At the same time, the Roman capital moved from Rome to Ravenna, and silver coinage appears to be cut off. A lot of commerce is sucked out of Britain, and the magnates, which are still ruling in Britain at this point, are very disaffected. They're not happy with the Roman administration affecting their rank and status with being wealthy in the economy. These landowners continued to enjoy quite good prosperity, but in 405, after Stilicho had removed these troops, there was a great onslaught from Ireland. And Britons managed to expel most of these and repel these attacks from Ireland. They were disaffected now, and they were not happy. Why were they, as citizens who paid taxes to the empire, not getting their fair due? But as the Irish were attacking, Germanic tribes burst across the Rhine into Gaul and across down through the Pyrenees into Spain. And so again, the empire was unable to help them. This had happened before. And these magnates were not happy with Rome. The army killed their civilian leader and raised a soldier as commander who would become Constantine III, and he took a lot of troops again out of Britain, as his predecessor had a while back, Max Newydd. See my video just made about how he gave Wales its independence 25 years before the rest of Britain, and Constantine III took lots of troops and officials and left Britain to itself. But Constantine was not the only contender, and wars erupted in Gaul across the water between him and Gerontius, a British general. The British had a lot of generals in the empire who were competing for the throne. It seemed to be a tradition we had. We wanted the empire to be ours. And Stilicho the Vandal got involved too, wanting the throne as well. In 408, Saxons came, and the people at the time, the Britons, we beat them off that time. But we were still part of the empire, and I don't know exactly why we did what we did next, but we did. We kicked the Romans out. We were fed up with having to support ourselves and having no gain from it, I suppose. And these were led by Pelagian magnates, and the heresy of Pelagius, a Christian rebellious orthodoxy which was very appealing for those discontented with imperial authority. And so 409, 410 expelled these, and there was a bloody purge. A Christian text, De Vita Christiana, from the year 411, only 2 years after this, had this to say about what happened. Those who have freely shed the blood of others are now being forced to spill their own. Some lie unburied, food for their beasts and birds. Others have been individually torn, limb from limb. Their judgments killed many husbands, widowed many women, orphaned many children. Now it is their wives who are widowed, their sons who are orphans, begging for their daily bread. The Greek writer Zosimus, a century later, writes that the Britons freed themselves, the cities, from barbarian rule, and that all of Amorica and much of Gaul did the same. They freed themselves from these Germanic tribes that were coming in. And so we get a glimpse that this Saxon and British war that went on for 200 years or so was not one way. We won some of the first key battles, but throwing out the empire was probably a bit of a foolish move, long term. Down in Amorica, present-day Brittany, they called in a man, Germanus, a saint, to help them fight, and it did not go so well. That's why they called him in. But the empire was able to regain authority with the help of this saint in Gaul, and he crossed into Britain to then try and re-establish some imperial authority of some kind. We're not sure. There's no text explicitly saying what happened. Saint Germanus came to Britain in the year 429. So 20 years after Rome had officially gone, he came here to Britain to root out the Pelagians and to restore order and Christian righteousness, and he helped them defeat Picts and other invaders. And he came to St. Albans, Verulamium, and here he found a local ruler bearing the authority of a Roman imperial tribune and fawning multitudes, ruling in the manner of the Romans. This is important. We know that 429, we Britons were ruling just north of London, and we know that we were ruling in a Roman manner, still claiming that inheritance, that far east in present-day England. Power, it seems, had passed from Roman officials to the landed aristocracy, who were decadent, and because of this they needed help to fight off these new adversaries, and this became a very weak point in our armor. They were hiring mercenaries to fight. And the British cleric Gildas, a very important man because of what he wrote, says that these were tyrants, and they're not tyrants in how we use the word tyrant. There's a different meaning here. It just means they have no legal authority, but what it was British men taking responsibility for leading their people in battle themselves, and then declaring themselves rulers, strong men. And we get battle leaders in these different Roman commonwealths, emerging as rulers of various cities in Britain. Gildas is very important because he wrote a three-part sermon encapsulating much of the history of the near-present era, de Exido e Conquistu Britannia, the ruin and conquest of Britain. It's the only thing we really have of a near contemporary source of this period. And what's important for us is that he was definitely a British cleric, proto-Welsh. But he was quite brutally honest and very acidic in his temperance toward his fellow Britons. In the third part of his sermon, he begins with this: Britain has priests, but they are fools, numerous ministers, but they are shameless, clerics, but they are wily plunderers. He goes on and on against the clergy of his age, vicious attacks upon 5 British kings, mainly in Wales, Maelgwn, Gwynedd, and one very important to this context, Gorthern, Vortigern. And he has an origin story wrapped around him of how the Saxons came to this island, and who knows if there's much truth in it, but we do know that the part of this story in which there are mercenaries being brought in from Saxon lands to fight our enemies, that we know happened to some degree. And so Gorthern, we're not going to call him Vortigern in this, he brings them in to Britain, willingly brings these people in, the most dangerous people, inviting them into your own home. That doesn't usually end well in history, does it? Oops. Now this name may be a personal name, but it does have overtones, the 2 elements, Tern, Gur. It suggests kind of an overlord king, one of these tyrants who assumed power for themselves rather than depending upon these decadent Roman magnates to defend our people for us. So he was shouldering responsibility to defend us. The kingdom of Powys lists him as a founder, and he's linked to the kingdom of Dyfed as well from the Demetae. He's listed as being around in this 429 era, when Germanus is coming to Britain, and Gildas mentions that things go very deeply wrong right after this. The writing of Gildas has a chilling echo, in that we find he's reporting that the Britons here were writing to Aetius across the water between 446 and 454, give or take, asking for aid. We wrote, the barbarians drive us to the sea, and the sea drives us back to the barbarians. They felt civilized, and these warrior hordes pouring in across the sea were tearing down all that they inherited from Rome, and they did not know where to go. This empire they claimed as an inheritance no longer offered them help or aid. What to do? Britain seemed lost. Gildas does not mention King Arthur, and he is the one of all the writers we have, which are not many, writing in or after this period, is the one who's most likely to have known such a man. And we have no evidence that such a man existed, but what we do have are these various features of various men using Roman titles and Roman military commanding styles. From central northern England on the borders of Scotland all the way down through Wales and South England to Brittany, and that seems more like what King Arthur is, an amalgamation of all these various peoples into a singular legend, offering people hope in this dark time, hope of victory and restoration of our island, Britain. We see in Gildas's work over and over again that he's not happy that we abandon Latin in favor of our own language, and he sees us as sinning in terms of the Christian morality and Romanitas, the essence of Romanness, the civilization, the imperial glory that is ours. He sees us as losing to the Saxons because we abandoned our Roman civilization. But I don't see us, in this sense, abandoning it truly. Even in our legal words and much of our military structures across these centuries, we were keeping Roman style. We even buried our dead along the roadsides in the manner of the Romans. Many centuries later, Germanus was praised for civilizing us in the manner of the Romans. I think Gildas is a bit bitter. Gildas gives us the tale of Hengist, which I'll explain to you in brief now. Prosperity in Britain ended in plagues, the renewal of Pictish attacks, and above all in civil war. Gareth encountered the Picts by hiring Saxon federates and, enthralled with Hengist's daughter, a Saxon mercenary, gave them Kent in exchange for his daughter. The Saxons took advantage of the civil wars among the Britons. According to legend, rose in revolt, brought in thousands more of their unspeakable kin, betrayed a peace conference in a massacre which was to prove deathless in Welsh annals. This was Brad y Cyllurion, the treachery of the long knives, in which British nobles were invited to share in feast and peace, and then slaughtered, betrayed, lied to, and killed. And this could be a metaphor for what happened, or it could have actually happened. We simply don't have the evidence. But Gildas did write more on this. He said, "All the greater towns fell to the enemy's battering rams. All their inhabitants, bishops, priests, people, were mown down together. Horrible was it to see the foundation stones of towers and high walls thrown down, bottom upwards, in the squares, mixing with holy altars and fragments of human bodies, as though they were covered with a purple crust of clotted blood, and in some fantastic wine press." Across Western Europe, as the empire disintegrated, men like Gareth were calling themselves kings and were located around the hearts of new political polities that would create the later nation states of Europe. And this very much likely would have happened had something not happened, which we're not entirely sure what happened. There's no evidence. 15 years after Germanus, the land, according to Gildas, has been switched over to the Saxons, and something around 441 to 450 has gone dreadfully wrong because huge tracts of eastern England are now in the hands of these barbarian mercenaries. And we don't know how this happened. It could have been that we suffered plague, which we know we did, and we were, the Britons, concentrated in cities, and these mercenaries at the time were not, and that we held on in the West because it was more sparsely populated. Or it could be that someone opened the gates and allowed them in, and then they betrayed us, these mercenaries. It could be that they won a major battle against us and took over the southeast, or that they coordinated more landings. We know that we lost sea forts during this time along the south coast. But probably it was the combination of all of these things. But we need to get back to Rome to understand what happened next. This was the first half of this video. When I'm done with the second half in the next couple of days, I will put it here. Thank you very much for watching, and diolch yn fawr iawn to my Patreons who contribute. I'll put a link down below if you'd like to join them. See you in the next half of the video.